Start to find our seated form, our breathing, straight spine, present mind. Bring our awareness to the mind and to the body. For a moment, let's introduce the body to the mind like an old friend. Take this moment to really get to know yourself. What does it feel like to sit here in a posture? What muscles are feeling the most energy that we've been carrying through our day with us? Where does your breathing feel like it's most prominent? Start to notice the little qualities of our breathing, whether the breath is thick or thin, or heavy or shallow. Just notice the subtle details of what it feels like to take a single breath of air. And we move our awareness from our breathing to our diaphragm, to these muscles in the core and the lower back. I'm going to take this moment before we find our Yogasana forms to find our ability to move our awareness throughout the body, throughout the spine, and the lower back, and the mid back. Become fully aware of every cell in the body, every muscle and tendon, every little sensation that we can sharpen the mind to become aware of. You can bring that awareness all the way up through the back of the neck into the very top of the head. And like an old friend, let the body begin to meet the mind. Notice how it feels to have a mind and body completely coming together. Usually we live our lives in this sense where the body is doing one thing and the mind is another thing, and there's a little sliver of a Venn diagram in which they overlap. But throughout this practice of yoga, today we're going to set our intention to unify that body and mind in our full awareness of what it feels like to have a body, feeling every inch of skin, every little part of the body with all of our awareness, and creating that intention to be aware of every posture, every form, every little part of the body from the very top of the head down through the toes. I wanted to try a little breathing, body scanning exercise, our seated posture, where as we take our inhalation, we can imagine the energy flowing from the very bottoms of the toes, up the legs, up the torso and the spine, and all the way up to the very top of the head. And with each exhalation, we can scan the body from the very top of the head, all the way down through the core, through the arms, through the fingertips, through the hips, thighs, calves, feet, toes. And see if you can, with a single breath of air, become completely and fully present within this posture and this form in our seated Sukhasana. And we'll set our intention to find this awareness in every form we might fulfill throughout this practice, sealing it with an Om together. Let's begin to open our eyes. Place our hands onto our lap. Find our shoulders pulling down the sides of the body. Let's place this right leg out to the right in a half hero's pose. We're going to start with a little gentle twist. So we can bring our hands over to the right and just walk our hands around to the right side of the body, taking a deep breath into that left kidney as you try to create a little bit of space in the spine. And exhaling our way back to center, finding our hands at our heart with a straight spine, inhaling to lengthen the spine, lifting up. And exhaling as we twist over to the left, creating space in that right kidney, breathing into that right kidney. And exhaling our way back to center. A deep inhalation as we lengthen the spine, lift up from the top of the head. Release, flipping our feet so that the left heel is outside the left hip, the toes pointed towards the tailbone. This right foot in front of us, like our Sukhasana. Finding our form here, feeling this left hip start to open up. As we inhale to grow tall and exhale, walking our hands over to the right. Feeling this left side body open up long. Exhaling out all the stale air into our twist. And inhaling back to center. Feeling the side bodies and the spine begin to awaken. Inhaling to grow long. And exhaling our hands over to the left. Walking our hands all the way over to the left as far as they'll go. Exhaling out all the stale air from the lungs. And inhaling back to center. Finding our hands on the mat in front of us, and we're going to find our tabletop position for a few cat and cow positions, starting with our wrists beneath our shoulders, our knees beneath our hips. Exhaling as we bow, tucking the tailbone down, pushing those hands behind us and lifting the heart through the mid-back, creating space between every vertebrae on the back of the spine. And then exhaling as we pull the heart forwards, looking up, keeping the chin down as we look up to keep our Jalandhara Bandha in place. Opening our heart, lifting our tailbone up behind us, and letting the space just beneath the ribs bow to that space between the hands and toes. Exhaling into our cat. We can follow through at our own pace. Finding our own rhythm of our breathing. Meeting me in a neutral spine. And we can sway to the left and to the right, warming up the wrists, tucking the toes behind us, lifting our knees and finding our first Ardha Mukha Shavasana, downward facing dog, pushing those fingertips out overhead, letting the back of the neck release, releasing the jaw and the space behind the brow, paddling out the feet, and we can test our distance, how long would we like our dog to be. See if we can find a place where the heels can gently, but not too easily, grace the bottom of the mat. And then push through the heels, push the heart towards the toes, lift the tailbone up, and look down at your toes and then up at your belly button, feeling some length through the back of the spine, pushing those shoulders onto the back and down the side body, keeping our weight into our fingertips and knuckles. And we'll look up and tippy toe, step by step, inch by inch, coming to the top of the mat. Grabbing our elbows, finding our ragdoll, releasing the neck, swinging to the left and to the right. One side and then the other. Releasing the elbows. And then hinging from the hips as we rise tall. Lifting ourselves up, and bringing our hands together at our heart. Shoulder blades coming down the side bodies, maintaining strong core here. Let's, as we exhale, bring the belly button in, and as we inhale, raise the belly button up. Lifting up the pelvic floor, finding our Mula Bandha. Feeling the core strong like a corset, pulling those ribs in, and maintaining this throughout our sun salutation A, as we inhale, to rise up lengthening through both side bodies and exhaling, hinging from the hips as we bow forwards. Hands coming down to the mat, lifting that tailbone up behind you, releasing the back of the neck. Weight comes to the fingertips, and behind the knuckles, you can step or hop, finding your way to your plank pose. Squeezing the mat between the fingertips and the toes, trying to lengthen the spine, the very back of the spine, keeping the spine very long and in a straight line. We're going to lower down for our very mindful Chaturanga Dandasana, coming an inch from the mat. Then we'll let the hips and legs come down to the mat, opening our heart up, trying to pull the ribs in and up, using the core muscles to get as much height on the upper body as you can, and using the fingertips to pull that heart forwards, tucking the chin down and sliding the chin back. So we're bringing our ribs in and our heart up, ribs in, heart up. Finding a low cobra and a high cobra as we tuck our toes behind us and push back into our second Ardha Mukha Svanasana, downward facing dog, pedaling out our feet. Finding our breathing, taking 5 breaths. And here, let's again see if on the inhalation, we can breathe our awareness all the way from the tips of the toes to the tips of the fingers. And on the exhalation, see if we can scan the body from the very tips of the fingers, noticing every muscle throughout the arms and the side body, the core, the back, the thighs, the calves, the toes. We can place our weight into our fingertips, shift our weight a little bit forwards, and step or hop to the top of the mat, finding our forward fold, releasing the neck as we bow, hinging from the hips, trying to lift that tailbone up behind us. You can grab opposite elbows as before and swing in our ragdoll to one side and the other. Coming back to center as we releasing the jaw, and then hinging from the hips as we rise up, growing tall, finding our hands overhead and pulling them down to our heart, Samasthi, elbows at our sides, our core strong. Finding our balance onto our left foot as we test our weight and bring this right knee into our standing balance for our classical sun salutation, just testing our balance today, seeing if it's here on this side, and slowly and mindfully moving as intentionally as possible. We're going to step this right foot back into a low lunge, finding those toes down to the mat, the heel lifted, that right knee comes down to the mat. Our hands can come to the hips, and let's bring this right hip forwards and push this left hip down, squeezing those toes against the mat, pulling them towards one another so that you can draw that right hip forwards. Our hands can come to the shoulders, pull them down the side bodies. On the exhalation, we draw the belly in. On the inhalation, we rise all the muscles in the core up. Hands can come to our heart or to our sides, lengthening the muscles on the sides of the arms and maintaining the strength. Let's bring our hands down to frame this left foot, lifting the right knee off of the mat, stepping our left foot back, finding our plank pose, holding here for a moment as we lengthen the torso using the forelimbs. And we'll bring our knees, chest, and chin to the mat, keeping the tailbone lifted, finding a slight back bend in the lower back, the lower mid back, wagging the tail to the left and to the right. The fingertips beneath the shoulder blades, and the weight comes into the knuckles as we lift the heart an inch off of the mat and pull the heart forwards into our low cobra. Shoulder blades coming onto the back, heart lifting up, ribs pulling in. You can look up, but keep the chin tucked a little bit behind the ears, tucking the toes behind us, finding our downward facing dog, Ardha Mukha Svanasana, pedaling out our feet, breathing here. Again, each breath scanning the entire body from toes to head from fingertips to toes, head to foot, foot to head. Let's raise the right foot behind us, lifting it as high as it goes, then an inch higher, pushing out to that heel, squaring those hips, stepping that right foot forwards between the thumbs, finding our low lunge on this side. Left knee comes down to the mat, hands come to our hips, and as we pull those feet together isometrically on the mat, we are drawing this left hip forwards, drawing this right hip down. You can also draw it with your hands on the hips. You bring the hands to the shoulders and draw them down the side body, noticing how that as you draw them down, you're opening the heart up. But while you open that heart up, keep these ribs tucked in and maintaining that action, keeping those elbows at our sides, hands either in prayer, engaging them together, or our hands can reach to our sides, lengthening the outsides of the arms and maintaining that strength in the core as our hands come down to frame this right foot, lifting this left knee off of the mat and stepping it into our standing balance as we began, finding our way to our mountaintop posture and taking this moment on 2 feet to find all 4 corners of both feet, the little moment of gratitude for how great it feels to have 2 feet, to be able to be this balanced in our daily life. We take it for granted. Let's bring our hands to our heart. And inhale to rise up, lengthening through both side bodies. Exhaling as we bow, fingertips come down to the mat. We're gonna find our Utkatasana, so keeping the shoulders at this height, bend the knees, find the hips dropping low. Make sure you can still see the big toes sticking out from your knees. The knees are just over heels. Our hands come to our heart or overhead, bouncing those hips up and down, see if you can find a right angle at the knee. And exhaling as our hands come down in front of the feet, finding our weight into the hands as we step or hop or jump, finding our plank pose. Dandasana, using the strength in all 4 limbs to lengthen that spine, using the strength in the core to pull the head up, creating as much length as we can, and maintaining it while we lower down, Chaturanga Dandasana. Opening our heart up into a cobra, shoulder blades worn on the back, heart open, ribs in. You can look up, but keep the chin slightly down. Keep that belly button in, tucking our toes behind us. And find downward facing dog. So here we are lengthening through both side bodies. Try to find that line of energy from the pinky toes to the sides of the legs, through the hips, the side bodies, hollowing out the armpits, feeling the triceps, the outsides of the arms, all the way through those little pinky fingers. And with each breath of air, tracing your awareness through both side bodies, from toes to fingers, from fingers to toes. Let's lift that right foot up behind us, lifting it as high as it goes, bending the knee, stacking those hips. See if you can look underneath your left armpit. Point the right toe, see if you can see that right toe underneath that left armpit. Keeping those shoulders square, stacking those hips. Breathing to that right kidney. And then as we exhale, step that right foot forwards between the thumbs, finding our first warrior 1. So that back foot about 45 degrees, the front knee just above the heel. Our hips come square, our shoulders over hips. Let's let our arms grow overhead, lengthening, hollowing out those armpits, reaching through the fingertips, drawing the left hip forwards, drawing that right hip down, keeping the core strong as we exhale, coming down to bow, finding Our hands framing this right foot and stepping back into our plank. Lengthening the spine with our plank and lowering down Chaturanga Dandasana. We like these. Opening up into our low cobra. This time, let's make it a really low cobra so we get a nice juicy bend in those arms. Find those fingertips pulling the heart forwards. See if we can use the core to lift the heart up and see if we can use the fingertips to pull the heart forwards. Tucking our toes behind us and finding our downward facing dog. Again, taking a few breaths where we can trace the lines of energy as we lengthen both side bodies from the pinky toes through the legs, through the side bodies, hips, armpits, triceps, all the way up to the pinky fingers. This time we lift the left foot out behind us, lifting it as high as it goes. You can bend the knee, stack the hips, keep those shoulders square. Stack that left hip on top of the right. Hollow out that right armpit and look underneath the right armpit. See if you can see your left toes. Try to reach those left fingertips forwards to keep them in line with the right. Keeping our core strong here. Let's step the left foot forwards between the thumbs, finding our warrior one. Warrior one. Virabhadrasana one. Hands come overhead, side bodies long. We're isometrically trying to squeeze those feet together against the mat. And notice how when doing so, we're drawing that right hip forwards, we're drawing that left hip down, and we're lengthening both side bodies as we pull the ribs in. Point that heart up. Let's bring our hands to our heart, keeping the core strong as we bow. Hands coming to frame this left foot and stepping our left foot back, finding our plank pose. One more Chaturanga Dandasana. Let's make it very mindful, very aware as we lower down as slowly as comfortable, opening up into our low cobra. We'll start in this low cobra as we lift this heart up. And we'll find a high cobra. See if we can almost straighten the arms, keep a micro bend in the elbows and look up. We'll come back down to our low cobra, keeping those elbows at our sides, tucking our toes behind us. See if we can find an up dog, lifting the hips and the legs off of the mat as you squeeze the mat between the fingertips and the toes, pushing the tailbone out behind us, lengthening the spine, finding our downward facing dog, reaching through the fingertips, reaching through the heels, lengthening the backs of the shoulder blades, down through the middle fingers. Let's take a breath of air as we trace this line and try to lengthen this line between the backs of the heels, the backs of the legs, calves, through the glute, through the tailbone and the spine, lengthening the lower back and the mid back, lengthening the shoulder blades on the back, and the backs of the arms, reaching through those middle fingers, bowing the heart towards the toes, looking forwards, stepping or jumping or hopping, finding your way to the top of the mat. And we bow, lifting our tailbone behind us, releasing the neck, releasing the jaw, release any tension in the brow. We can inhale to look up, finding a gentle heart opener as the shoulder blades come onto the back. Exhale to bow, releasing the back of the neck. Notice the height of the shoulders. Bend the knees, keep the shoulders at this height, finding Utkatasana, our chair pose, balancing our hips, finding ourselves strong and solid. Once we find our stability, we can add our prayer twist. So this right hand comes to the right thigh, the left elbow crosses over, hands to the heart, and we lift the heart to the hands. It's trying to really lengthen that right side body, the lower right side of the back. exhaling into the twist, and inhaling back up to center. Balancing our hips, finding our stability, finding the heart open. Left hand comes to the left thigh, the right elbow crosses over, hands find prayer. And then on the next exhale, we lift the heart to the hands. Don't push the hands down to the heart. Lift the heart, lengthen that left side body. Exhale all the stale air out of the lungs into the twist as you look up. And exhaling to release, hands to our heart. Exhale to bow, straightening the legs, finding our forward fold. And hinging from the hips as we rise up, growing tall. Lengthening, lengthening, growing taller than you've been all day. And bringing our hands to our heart and to our sides. Let's release and find our windmill, find our energy, wherever it may be. Noticing the rhythm of your breathing and how it continues to change every breath. Let's let the arms dangle to a pause at their own pace. Finding a moment of stillness. Our standing mountain posture, their hands at our heart. Noticing our balance on both of our feet, stacking the spine so that the spine is straight, each vertebrae stacked like a pile of stones. Lifting up to the very top of the head. See if we can place our center of gravity onto that right foot, gripping the mat with the 3 arches of the foot. Lifting the left knee up into our standing balance. The left hand come to the left. The ankle, place that ankle into our tree pose for Shasana. You can either have the heel above or below the leg. When you do, see if you can bring the left hand to the left knee and open it out and behind you, finding this hip opener. This should feel like a half butterfly, adding balance. Let's lift our arms overhead. See if we can add a gentle back bend, opening the heart. Exhaling the hands back to the heart, lifting the left knee into standing balance. And we're gonna step it back into a high lunge, tucking those toes, keeping that heel lifted, bending into that right leg. Our hands can come to the hips and we can square them. So we're drawing this left hip forwards. Hands coming to the shoulders, pulling them down the side bodies as our arms reach overhead. And then see if we can mindfully tap that left knee down to the mat into a low lunge. Don't put your weight onto that knee, just see if you can come just a gentle tap and then lift it back up. See if we can maintain the height of the hips while we do a second left knee. Gently comes down to tap, working on those legs, and comes back up. Third time, hands can come to the heart. Left knee, gently come down to tap, and lift its way back up. Our arms come long into warrior 2, opening the left leg perpendicular to the right, so the right heel intersects the left arch of the foot, finding a full wingspan, opening this right leg out to the right so you can still see your big toe on that right side. Flipping the palm, we'll reverse the warrior, lengthening through that right side body, taking a deep breath here, and exhaling into our side angle pose, trying to lengthen this left side body, crossing the right forearm over that right leg, palm up. Let's bring our hands down to frame this right foot. Spinning the left heel up. Lifting this right foot up and off the mat. See if we can find a three-legged dog. And hold for a moment before we step or hop or jump, switch, finding the other side of our high lunge with our hips coming into alignment. And our shoulders, keeping this strong with the heart up, ribs in, arms can reach overhead, and this right knee comes down, slowly coming just a tap, lifting its way back up, finding our high lunge, finding the form, noticing the height of the hips, keeping them at about this height, trying not to let them dip as that right knee comes down for knee tap number 2. Lifting it back up. See if you can keep those hips as low as they are and stable and steady. Let's find our third knee tap. Working into that leg, double bent leg lunge. Coming back up into our high lunge. And the left arm forwards, the right arm back, spinning that right heel perpendicular. Finding our warrior 2. Left hand can come to the inside of this left leg and open it up just a little bit, making sure you can see the big toe from your vantage point here, opening your full wingspan, lengthening those arms, and flipping the left hand up. And for the wall behind you, lengthening your left side body. And exhaling to our warrior 2 and our side angle. Finding this right side body really long as you're reaching for something with this right hand. Take a deep breath of air and try to expand this line between that right heel through the right leg, the right hip, side body, and the hollowed out armpit through the tricep and the palm, reaching through those fingertips. Exhaling out into our warrior 2, hands coming to the heart. We're gonna have the hands come down to frame this left foot, lifting it up into our standing split. We can find our way to our standing balance, testing our weight on the left foot. We can end where we began in our tree pose, taking any moment you might need to regain your balance. Find Vrikshasana, using this as a hip opener to open this right hip out to the right. Finding stable balance, lifting up to the very top of the head, opening the hands overhead, and opening that heart, finding a gentle, subtle back bend, and maintaining stability as much as possible. Hands come to the heart, feet release back to center. And we'll take a moment, step on the toes, toenails down to the mat. Release any tension from those legs. Finding our breathing. Finding ourselves. When we're ready, when we've regained our energy, we're gonna find ourselves in our mountain pose at the very top of the mat with a very straight spine. We're gonna hinge from the hips, keeping that spine as straight as possible, keeping those shoulder blades onto the back. See if we can form an L. Keeping that lower back in the straight, the heart is the most forward thing in our L pose. Lifting that tailbone up. So the tailbone is the highest thing as we bow, finding our forward fold, fingertips coming down to the mat, releasing the neck. Let's step the right foot back into a low lunge. That right knee comes down to the mat, hands coming to the hips. Finding our hips square, our shoulders in alignment. And our hands can come to the inside of this left leg. You can wiggle the left foot a little bit out to the left, finding a lizard lunge. Drawing this right hip forwards, drawing this left hip back. You can stay here or you can come onto the forearms. I like to open onto the knife edge of that foot. Bringing that leg a little bit further out to the side, really working into the hip. You can also come back onto the hands and walk those fingertips as far forwards as they might go as we bow into this lunge. And we can walk those hands over to the right, feeling this left armpit hollow out, this left side body grow long. Exhaling back to center, reaching those fingertips forwards, and finding a gentle counter stretch to the left. Feeling this left hip squeezing against the left side body. And then we'll walk our hands back in the inside of this left leg, lifting this right knee off of the mat, lifting the left hand off of the mat, finding a side plank prep or a revolved high lunge. Bring our hands down to the inside of that foot. Our weight can come into our hands behind the knuckles and fingertips. And we'll see if we can step or hop, finding our way to the other side, starting with our low lunge. Finding the form here from the feet to the hips, to the shoulders. Finding those hips very straight. This left hip is pulling forwards, this right hip, you're pushing it down, trying to keep them in alignment with one another. And then the hands can come to the inside of this leg. We can give ourselves some little hip circles here. Or come on to our forearms, whichever we did on the other side, finding this lizard. Or our hyper pigeon if we come onto the knife edge of that right foot and bring that hip all the way out to the right. Exhaling to deepen into the hip. We can bring the sole of the foot down to the mat and come back onto our palms, onto our hands. Walk those fingertips in front of us, finding this long bow, this lunge. And we'll walk our hands as far to the left as we can to open that right side body, that hollowing out that right armpit, opening up that right hip. Walking our hands back to center and crossing them over to the right. Gentle counter stretch. Coming back to center, hands on the inside of the foot, pushing the left hand to the mat, lifting that right hand up and off the mat, maybe lifting that left knee off of the mat for our revolved high lunge or Vashisthasana prep, depending on how you look at it. Trying to lengthen those arms and the wingspan. We're gonna bring our hands down to the inside of this foot. Let's see if we can step the left foot to the outside of this left hand, finding ourselves in our yogi squat, the malasana, balancing our hips. We can find a couple binds here, with the left arm around that left leg, seeing if you can find the left hip, and reach the right hand around the outside of that right side of the back. Maybe the hands can come together and you can find them. So you bind them and you look up, finding the twist, stacking the shoulders, exhaling, getting rid of all the stale air from the lungs, and releasing back to center. Hands coming to our heart, finding our heart open, our spine as straight as possible, and wrapping that right arm around the front of that right leg, reaching for the right hip, lifting this left hand around the left side body, reaching for the right hand. Maybe you find them, maybe you just grab your shirt or your back. Either way, you're trying to stack those shoulders, to open the heart, to look up. And exhaling, getting rid of all the stale air before we inhale back to center, hands to our heart. Hands down to the mat in front of us. See if we can step this left foot back into our high lunge. This right arm reaches up, finding our weight on the left hand and into that right leg. You can either stay here, or if you can push your weight forward, see if you can lift this left foot off of the mat, finding a revolved half moon, pushing through the heel, lifting that heel as high as the hip. Finding a gentle twist, trying to stack those shoulders and look up. Exhaling as we release, stepping this left foot back into our Malasana squat, finding ourselves into this nice yogi squat that seems to do everything the hips need. You can imagine binding both of our arms around the back. They probably won't reach. Maybe they reach the hips. Maybe get the fingertips to the hips, and that's good. Trying to open the heart. And then we'll release. Hands come to the insides of the feet, and we step the right leg back into our high lunge. That right hand comes down to the mat. The right hand onto the inside, the left foot, and the left hand reaches overhead, stacked on top of the right. Trying to find our full wingspan. Testing our weight into that right hand and the left foot. Seeing if we can push our weight forwards enough to lift that right foot off of the mat. It's optional as long as we're pushing our weight into the hands and pushing as much weight in that left foot and that right hand as possible. Maybe that right foot comes up, maybe it doesn't. Let's step it back down from our revolved half moon. Hands come down to the inside of this leg. And we're gonna step it forwards into our Malasana and sit onto our glutes, finding our butterfly.
Well, good. How are you?
Yeah, well, now our hips are so open, our butterfly is gonna feel great. So we try to get all 10 toenails, or as many of them as we can, down to the mat. Try to roll the calves forwards, rolling the thighs back. Try to sit up tall with the heart open, shoulder blades coming down the side bodies. I like to hook my 2 fingers and thumbs around the big toes, keep the elbows at my sides, just below my hips, opening the heart up. Let's see if we can just sit up and sit tall, see how tall we can sit, how proudly can we raise our heart, sliding the chin behind the ears, trying to form a straight line with the spine. And as we exhale, we draw the belly in. As we inhale, we strengthen the core and lift it up. Finding strength in the core, pulling those ribs in and lifting that heart up, lifting up through both side bodies. When our core and our whole front body and our whole upper and mid back feel very strong, make sure the lower back is protected with the bottom of the core. And see if we can hinge from our hips, and only hinge from our hips with a very flat spine and a straight back as we bow forwards, bringing our heart down to the toes, keeping that tailbone behind you, and keeping it in this straight line and as straight of a line as possible. Exhaling out all the stale air and inhaling back to center. Release. The second time we can bow as we open those feet. This time we reach the top of the head towards the toes, trying to create as much length in the back of the spine, finding a forward fold. So we're really lengthening the mid back. Exhaling out all the stale air of the lungs. And then inhaling back up to center. Hooking those toes with the fingers and the thumbs. Let's see if we can lift them. And find Upavista Konasana, our wide-legged forward fold from a seat. Hooking those toes, trying to keep those legs straight, but not forcing them to be straighter than is comfortable. We'll see if we can bend the elbows and bow the heart down to the mat, trying to bring the forehead and the nose to the mat between the heels. Bring that tailbone behind you and just take notice of if this is in your body. Is this more of a forward fold, or are you able to keep the lower back straight? Can you use that core to keep the lower back straight as we lift up? Releasing our hands, bringing our hands to the heart. Let's bring this right leg to our cradle. Rocking side to side, left to right. And we're gonna cross this left heel to the outside, or the right heel to the outside of the left hip. Finding a cross-body twist for our Marichyasana. Exhaling into the twist. And inhaling back to center. And then see if we can cross this right elbow over the front of the right leg, grabbing the outside of the left foot. And this left hand comes down to the inside. I'm gonna spin this place. For our grasshopper pose. So this right hand grabs the outside of this right foot. This left hand comes about shoulder distance from the right foot. And then we bow the heart between the left hand and the right foot. And see if we can push as much weight as possible into this foot and into this hand, and maybe we can get just a moment of air time. Lifting and setting it back down. And then we release. Let's flip our feet and find the other side. So this left heel comes over the right leg to the right hip. Finding you can give it a hug. Hug that hip into the side body. And then we gotta find our twist. So that right elbow crosses over the left leg. And we exhale, looking all the way to the left. Inhaling back up to center. Crossing the left elbow over the front of the left leg. See if we can cross the left hand to the outside of this left foot. Finding this stretch in the leg. The right hand comes shoulder distance from this left foot. And lean forwards. Lean forward, push your weight into that foot, push your weight into that hand. There you go, that looks good. Our grasshopper pose. Isn't that fun? And release. Actually, let's cross the right heel to the left hip and the left heel underneath to that right hip. We're gonna find our cow face, our Gomukhasana. Hugging the hips in as we open the heart up, sitting tall. And then the left hand reaches behind the head and down the neck, and the right hand reaches behind the back and up the spine. See if you can find them or find the shirt. Wiggle your fingers together. Whatever you find, that's good. Take a deep breath into the shoulder as it becomes present, bringing all of your energy to opening that right shoulder up. We can bow forwards and exhale all the air out of our lungs. Inhaling back up to center, releasing the fingertips. And releasing our feet so that the right heel is underneath to the left hip. We gotta switch. The left heel is on top of the right leg to the right hip. Finding our cow face on this side. Finding our stability. You can give your hip a hug. love how this feels to hug the hip into the body, so that really opening that outside of that back of that left glute. Sitting up tall. When our foundation is stable, when our spine is straight, when our heart is open, we are going to cross the left arm behind the back of the head and down the neck, and that right hand behind the back and up the spine. See if we can find them, or find the shirt, or find a strap, or find anything that helps us to open those shoulders, keeping that neck straight and in alignment with the spine. So we're sliding the chin behind the ears. Maybe you can push that back of the head into the forearm. Don't let your ribs come out. Pull them in and keep the core strong as we take a deep breath into that right shoulder as it becomes present. And then releasing, exhaling out all of our stale air as we fold forwards, bowing over this left hip, over this leg. Inhaling our way back up to center, releasing our fingers. And we're going to unwind our feet. Let's cradle the right leg, working on our hips. Seeing if we can grab the outside of the right foot with the left hand and get that right elbow underneath the right leg, bringing that hand down to the hip. So we're just trying to open this hip. You can do any variation of cradle if your hips are not as open. So even just that might be good for you. We're all at different levels here. It's good. I love the hip cradles. You can also try the sundial. There you go. There you go. That looks fun.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. Keep at it every day.
It hurts like the outside of my knee. What is that about?
It shouldn't hurt the knee. You should be pointing the toe to protect so the muscles along the front of the leg are strong, and that should protect your knee.
Oh. Yeah, it's like all the tendons around my knee.
So don't push it to the point that your knee is having trouble, because you should be feeling it in like the back of the thigh. Because like here, like it's like here, it's like the bottom of the glute, the back of the thigh. That's where you want to be opening from. You don't want to be bending from the knee. Not yet. Yeah, that looks fun. Any variation of cradle that we might be doing to get our hip open, let's do that, and then place that right heel on top of the left hip, finding a half lotus. Pointing the right toes, keeping that heel tucked in to the inside of this left hip. We're going to find this posture and bow, folding forwards. Lifting ourselves back up to center. Noticing how the spine grows even and steady in our lotus postures. It's easy to sit on the sit bones. Let's release the foot and work on the left side, cradling this foot. Any variation of our cradle. You can do the baby cradle, hook underneath. I like to bring the left hand to the left hip, the right hand to the outside of this left foot. Straighten that leg as much as possible. This is the sundial. Yeah, there you go. Let's
just get it up there.
No, that's the right direction. You're like, really? Not as far as you think. That's good. That's really good. Do you feel that in that back of that thigh?
Yeah, here.
Yeah, that's what we want to be working. Our pigeon poses don't quite get into that as much as this does. When that leg is open and even to the other side, we're gonna wiggle that right heel to just beneath the left hip, then cradle this left heel and place it onto the inside of this right hip, pointing the toe, placing that knife edge of the foot just into that crease of the hip, finding our half lotus, finding our spine as straight as possible, our heart open, the shoulders pulling down the back, ribs pulled in, and we can bow, bowing into this left hip. Inhaling our way back up to the center. You can take any last cool downs that we might need. If you feel really open, if you'd like to practice full lotus, this is the moment for it. No pressure if you would like to continue any half lotus or happy baby or anything else. You gotta point the toes. Yeah, you just want the heel to the inside of the hip, and then the knife edge of the foot kind of rides along the crease of the hip. And so then do you see how easy it is to keep the spine straight? The spine just naturally wants to come straight up in our lotus. It releases so much tension from the lower back. And I think that this is one of those poses that's just naturally, innately so calming to the mind that you can almost feel this energy, this tensions that we carry through our body, like melting from the top of the head through the back of the neck, through the mid back and the lower back. You can feel these tensions like pouring out of the body through the base of the spine, finding this sense of calmness and stillness. You can stay here for your savasana or find a laying pose. Either way, we're here to find our breathing and our stillness. With each breath, allowing your body to grow calmer. Each exhale, releasing, letting go some form of tension somewhere in the body. With each inhalation, you can move your awareness to a different part, different muscle, different limb. With each exhalation, you release any tension, release, let go. Let the self grow limp and still. Try to find yourself completely, effortlessly free in this posture. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to think anything. You can be completely and utterly fulfilled in the stillness, this pose, in this posture, in this moment, in this body. And we can bring our mindfulness to fill every corner of the body, every inch of skin, every ounce of muscle, being fully aware of what we are living in. Let's take a moment, just say thank you to your body, just to thank yourself for sticking with this practice. And to thank yourself for taking care of yourself and for being there in every pose, in every breath, in every moment. We are gifted the opportunity to be alive. Let's not take a single moment for granted. We can begin to wiggle our fingers and our toes, maybe counting them with gratitude for every digit. So glad I have hands. I'm so glad I have feet. You can bend the knees into the chest, roll yourself into a ball, give yourself a hug, rocking from side to side, left to right. Rolling onto the right side body in a fetal position, feeling yourself transformed through these progressions of poses and postures. We realize our ability and capability to transform the self, the body and mind as we need to in this moment, in every moment we're here to face. That ability to move and to be aware of our movements is nothing short of a miracle. Do not be fooled. It is a beautiful gift to have a body and a mind, to be alive with them. And letting them unify, bringing the knees into our chest, and pushing ourselves up into a seated position, letting our hands at our heart and our eyes closed. Basking in this moment of stillness. One more rewarding breath of air to fulfill yourself, to thank yourself for this practice. I know I am so grateful for all of you for joining us this evening. The love and light in me honors that love and light in each of you. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Ah, this was great.
Yeah, I was glad to do that.
I'm so glad to see you.
Thanks, Wade.
A slice of heaven, Wade.
Thanks, guys.